Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have an amazing guest. I have Kenny Piecharka here from KWS Seeds Canada. Kenny, how are you?
Hi, Tracy. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I am so happy to have you on the show. We are going to have a fantastic conversation. Why don't we start right off and talk about you, your role, and KWS Seeds. I know you guys have a long history as a global seed company. When you share more about yourself, why don't we dive right in and talk about the history of KWS and its mission?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. First of all, I'm Kenny Piecharka. As you said, I'm the country manager for KWS Seeds Canada. I've been with the company for 3 years and in this role for the past year. So our business is focused here in Canada on hybrid rye, but globally we've got a long history. Since 1856, KWS has been breeding seed varieties. Principally, we started with sugar beet, but moved quickly into cereals, corn, canola, vegetables, potatoes, and basically you name it. So we've got a significant portfolio of crops, and we are now a global company. We're still family owned with German roots. So we have a unique culture that way, but we've expanded into 70 countries and over 5,000 employees. So being a top 5 seed company in the world, it creates a big mass of wealth, knowledge, and experience. But here in Canada, we're just 9 staff. So we're a nice, focused, growing group.
Wow, that's amazing. So 70 countries, you said. KWS, why did you choose to establish yourself in the Canadian market, and talk about how that journey's been so far?
Well, as an ambitious company, KWS has expanded globally, and they came to North America with joint ventures such as Ag Reliant in corn in the United States. They did set up a wheat breeding company in the USA, and during that time, they looked at the North American market and said, okay, from the portfolio, what else would fit well? And Canada being a traditional rye country, we had over 3 million acres 40 years ago. It was a good fit for hybrid rye, which is a core crop for KWS. We actually have 85% global market share and a significant breeding program based on it. And there's some advantages as to why KWS hybrid rye and Canada came together. And that's because rye is very suitable across geographies. It's one of the only crops that we actually grow the same varieties all the way from Canada to China across the Northern Hemisphere. And it has limited insect and disease pests. Okay. So it's also the most winter hardy cereal. And when you add all that up, there was a real fit for Canada. And KWS was able to come with known varieties, test them, get them registered, and work with distributors to commercialize them. And that started with sales in 2015.
Okay, fantastic. So you touched on this a little bit. I'm going to get you to go a little bit deeper. So hybrid rye seems to be a unique crop choice for KWS in Canada. You touched on that a little bit. You could touch on that again, but what sets hybrid rye apart from crops like wheat and barley? I'm curious about it. I'm sure everybody in our audience is. Can you share more?
Yeah, absolutely I can. And we are heavily invested in wheat and barley. We actually have a significant market share in both crops in Europe. Meanwhile, we're launching hybrid winter barley in the UK this year, and we do breed in hybrid wheat as well. So cereals are core. Now, hybrid rye, why the fit? Well, it's a true hybrid crop, and it comes with significant advantages that way. It has significant yield increase over wheat and barley. You're looking at 30% over winter wheat or 50% over spring wheat. Wow. So there's a significant advantage. It does come with a single use agreement, so it is seed that needs to be bought year over year, just like with canola or corn. And within that provides the investment to continue breeding operations, testing operations, and searching out traits that are advantageous. So the yield is honestly, a huge part of the component. And when you think hybrid rye, if you think return on investment, that has to be what gets us through the door. But additionally, on top of that, there's a lot of agronomic advantages. And one of the key ones is rye has allelopathy in that it produces a chemical in the early stages that actually inhibits other weeds from growing. Once it's growing, the allelopathy wears off, but the root system of hybrid rye is 3 times as big as wheat. So it scavenges for fertilizer, for water, and it competes with other weeds. So this combination combined with winter hardiness means what you can expect as a farmer is if you establish a stand well in the spring, you shouldn't have to spray any pesticides. And 80% of the acreage we have in Canada doesn't get any in-crop pesticides. So that's a pretty big advantage from a sustainability standpoint, from a cost saving standpoint. And it actually is a really good rotation if you have resistant weeds like resistant kochia, wild oats, things like that. So the combination of the economic advantages from yield, but also from some of the savings and time have really made it find a home here in Canada.
Okay. Wow. You know what? I love my job, Kenny. I talk to such smart people. You're such a wealth of information, and I learned so much.
Well, it's fun for me too. I love it, just to be totally honest with you. And I came from a background in seed services. So I was doing hybrid canola seed production in Canada, USA, South America. And when rye came to town, so did the opportunity to grow that crop. So even before KWS, I got to see it on the seed production side. And for global plant breeding, which is really a focus here in Canada now across all crops, it's nice to see a breeder like KWS come in, bring the technology, but also day to day, we get to see what we're doing in other markets. And I look forward to the opportunity to bring new crops here as well. But there has to be fun, and success has to be a part of that. So it is a crop that genuinely brings something new to farmers.
I love it. And again, I just love the people that come on my show because they are always so passionate about their product. And it's just so fun. I'm talking to them. I'm like, they love what they do. They love the product. And then it ends up being such an amazing conversation for our audience of farmers. So anyways, I had to mention that.
I appreciate that.
Okay, no problem. Let's shift gears a little bit. KWS PollenPLUS technology helps address challenges like ergot in rye production. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for growers who grew traditional open pollinated rye varieties in the past, there became an issue with ergot spores infecting the plants, producing ergot, and making that a challenge to get it to market, whether it's for bread, for distilling, for feed, and especially feed. We have quite tight tolerances for ergot. And the varieties were not bred for the characteristics you look for now, being an even tabletop, maturity that comes at once, so you have a small flowering period, lodging resistance, things like this. And what PollenPLUS specifically brings to us is it's a trait that KWS has registered, so we're the only ones who have exclusive access, and it results in higher pollen production. So basically, it makes the plant produce more pollen, and these pollen grains are what compete with ergot spores. So if you don't have enough pollen present in the field, if you don't have enough plants, you're going to have a lot more spores compared to the amount of pollen present. So KWS PollenPLUS varieties, they overproduce pollen. And then when you combine that with our agronomic recommendations, which we call our right seeding practices, to get the effective stand, you limit other secondary risks like tillering. So if your stand is not adequate and you have holes in the field, you can get late tillers coming off the sides. And by the time those late tillers flower, you don't have a lot of pollen in the field. Ergot can again infect. So some of the things we've done since we invested here in people is we've looked at the agronomics. We've actually increased the seeding rate targets. We've increased the agronomy recommendations on when you apply nitrogen. Because for example, in the spring, rye is going to flower 2 to 3 weeks earlier than winter wheat or triticale. So you really need to get your nitrogen on early. And a late application of nitrogen will encourage a great big forage crop. But when you're producing grain free of ergot, you want to get your stand, you want to get your nitrogen on early, and you want to get the most even flowering period you can. And that's where the PollenPLUS technology we have then gives you the best genetic advantage. So it gives you the full package.
Nice. That's clever. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, it's one of the techniques that a seed breeding company has access to. And with hybrids, where you can purposely target traits, gives you an advantage over traditional breeding programs. So we can move quite quickly when we see a disease or an agronomic trait that the market really needs, just like they do in the pre-mentioned crops like canola and corn.
I love talking to you guys, and then all the technology and traits and everything we have and this variety here, and thinking like the farming generation that we are now, the technology, the science, the varieties that we have compared to when my grandfather was farming, it's just unbelievable. It's so fascinating. That's why I love this industry. Okay, so I love what you shared there. Why don't we talk about livestock feed and forage? So I know beyond grain production, hybrid rye is used for livestock feed and forage systems. This is a growing area of focus for you guys. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is really something that we are investing directly in, and that's end use markets. So, as a bit of background, Europe, especially Germany and Poland, are the largest markets for rye grain production. And 65% of the grain they produce goes into hogs. So, there are significant advantages to quality for why that happens. And here in Canada, we're entering into hogs, but we also have a significant footprint into cattle feeding systems. And that's both with forage as rye silage and with grain. And some of the reasons the fit is so good is because one, they're high volume producers, and generally feed grains, you want to produce as much volume as you can, but you also need a certain quality spec. And that's where rye can meet that. And there is flexibility on the forage side. If you take an early cut and you're targeting higher protein and a certain digestibility for, say, the dairy market, you can cut it at the flag leaf. Whereas if you're targeting maximum biomass production and you're replacing a barley or a wheat in your cattle feedlot, for example, then you're looking at taking the rye at the milk stage. And if you're in an irrigated system like in southern Alberta or other parts of the prairies, you can get a second crop in. You can actually put an oats in afterwards. So now you have forage operations producing a rye oats combo that out yields their corn tonnage.
Wow.
So there's a lot of flexibility in use. I think flexibility is something you need to think of when you look at hybrid fall rye. But as a company working in a crop that doesn't have checkoffs, doesn't have public support, we actually employ an animal nutrition manager here in Canada. We have the same position in the US, and we have a whole team in Germany that work together to do studies with universities, with feed companies. And we extend that even further, that we do environmental analyses, and we're doing some life cycle analysis on carbon footprint of the crops.
Nice.
So as a feed crop, one, it meets the quality spec and the volume spec to make it economically viable. But we also have the in-house expertise that when we work with our partners in retail or on the farm level, we have a person in-house that you can reach out to and have a conversation to get the science, but also get the agronomy from the team. So it's pretty exciting for us, and it's definitely one of the two largest growth areas that we see for end use in rye.
I love it. Okay, so I'm building on this, and you partially answered what I want to talk to you about. Sustainable agriculture, sustainable farming. You can't hear farming without the word sustainable nowadays, it seems. So it's a growing concern. Do you want to speak to how KWS hybrid rye contributes to more sustainable farming practices?
For sure. Yeah, this is it can be a catchphrase or it can be a business strategy. And we see sustainability as a business being the term that we work towards. So it's one, producing more, and two, producing it with less. So I believe Canadian farmers are some of the more sustainable farmers. I've been to a lot of parts of the world, and I can tell you we do a lot less cultivation on average than say Europe. So zero till systems, using our micromanaged fertility and pesticide applications. All these kind of things are excellent. And what hybrid rye can add to it is you can get these high yields and high performance with reduced pesticides, as spoke about, but also reduced nitrogen, because rye actually uses 20% less nitrogen per bushel than wheat does.
Oh, wow.
So you can put in your same volume of nitrogen, but get more product out of it, which is an advantage. Meanwhile, the roots also scavenge quite a bit deeper. And by starting earlier in the spring, if you have a wet spring, you can get the advantage of using some of that moisture limiting runoff, and you got a really good snow trap when you establish a rye crop. So from erosion, from building up soil structure and organic matter, from reducing pesticides, those are some of the key sustainability factors. And we are doing some studies in North America, specifically in Quebec right now, and on swine in the US. But in Germany, it was shown through a study that we actually produce 25% less of a carbon footprint using hybrid rye versus winter wheat.
Wow. That is important. Environmentally, it's important. And then again, like you said, it's a farming practice. Farmers need to be sustainable in, right? Getting the most out with the least amount of inputs. It goes hand in hand with the best farming practices, right?
Yeah, and we really find rotation. You go adding another crop to your rotation, even if it's 1 in 4, 1 in 5 years, that's advantageous. Rye seed is used a lot in organic rotations as well because it does compete with weeds quite well.
Okay.
So there's a lot of advantages within feedlots. This is a hybrid. It's kind of like hybrid canola. In the late 90s, if you had a lot of nitrogen, the old version of Polish canola, if you will, would fall over and lodge. Now it can handle it. And this is the same. If you get a lot of nitrogen and weak rooting, you might see your barley crop fall over on you in July. But the rye has really good standability, really good early growth. So you get a nice root structure underneath it. And you're going to see it stand or take advantage of high nitrogen if you're in that scenario.
Interesting.
Yeah,
This
so
is
with manure rotations, it works great, for example.
fantastic. This has been the most enlightening conversation. I love it. What kind of support does KWS provide to farmers for seed selection and agronomy advice?
We have excellent resources. We actually have staff now that are all the way across the country from Western Alberta into Ontario, and we're working on filling in the gaps. So we do have regional people available to you. Best place to go is kws.com/ca. That takes you to our website where you have a list of our retails, and we encourage you to reach out to your local retail who carries our products. Meanwhile, you can also find our sales and service staff online with direct mobile phones. So we do like phone calls. We want to be in touch with all of our customers. It's still an emerging crop, so we have the capacity to talk to each and every one of you who are growing or interested in growing. So find us on our website. We also are quite active in the social media forum now. So KWS Canada is how you can find us on Instagram or Facebook. You can find us on LinkedIn. But the website is a great place to start because you can see all our products, you can see the services, some of the technical bulletins on feeding, and you can get a lot of data before you make the call. But we would like to hear from you. You asked a question, what other things could we talk about? Really, there's a mindset shift that I think is happening. We also have climate change happening, and I think you're going to see more winter crops coming in, especially in Western Canada. And that's where some of these advantages that come are going to be taken advantage of with a crop that provides cover, because that's what this is. It is also available to be moved into the cover crop market, and we do have a PollenPLUS offering as well. But I think before I overwhelm you with too much data, there's a lot of information online, and we'd just love to have a conversation. So have a look at kws.com/ca.
Perfect. And we'll put links to the website, social media platforms in the show notes. If you're listening, go to farmmarketer.com, Impact Farming, find this episode, and you'll find that all there. Or just head over straight to their website. So one final question. I'm sure there's a lot of farmers who are quite interested, again, want to be more sustainable environmentally, financially. Let's talk about end-use markets. As KWS grows in Canada, what can farmers expect next in terms of end-use markets?
Yeah, great. I've mentioned a little bit about some of them, but the traditional market would be bread milling and whiskey distilling. The North American preference for rye has always been a buyer in the market, and that market is relatively static to slightly growing. So it's steady and it's a good export market for Canadian farmers. There is a little bit of distilling in Manitoba and Ontario as well. But where we really see the growth come from is one, the domestic feed market in Canada, and that's feeding to hogs, feeding to cattle, and feeding to poultry is an area we're doing a lot of research in now, and the forage as well for cattle. So feed we see growing, and the opportunity there is, I'm not going to say unlimited, but we're just scratching the surface.
Nice.
The second area is cover crop, and rye is one of the main components of cover crop in the United States. Right now, there's 20 million acres of cover crop, and rye is present on 60% of that. So
Oh,
this is a significant market, and Canada plays a huge role. Probably in the last few years, we've been as high as 2/3 of the rye for that market in the US has been exported from Canada. And going forward, the USDA actually sees that market going to 50 million acres in the next 5 years. So it is looking to grow. They use it between crops. So they put rye on and then they come back with a corn crop. Put rye on again as cover and come back with a soybean crop. So they use it to hold the soil, to prevent runoff, those types of things. And we do allow our licensed partners to operate in that realm. So as a Canadian farmer, you can seed rye as grain, and you can contract that grain to your local PollenPLUS dealer who can purchase it and export it. So it's a new, unique opportunity. We've only launched that business in the last year, as previously you couldn't sell hybrid rye grain into it. But with the growth in that market and feed, we really see rye increasing from the 500,000 to 600,000 acres it is today to one day getting up into the area of 1 million acres and being a significant part of Canadian farmer rotations. But even today, the end uses extend from forage in BC all the way to grain in the Maritimes. And regionally, we've got quite a bit of knowledge on what markets might be available to you. So if somebody reaches out to us in Ontario or in Saskatchewan, we like to connect you with local users, local opportunities before you put the crop on the ground. Because as a farmer, you want to know you're going to have security on marketing. And being a new crop, it's an area that we want to be helping out. And we don't want to get into a jam where a farmer sits on seed or sits on grain for a few years after they grow the crop.
yeah. This has been a fantastic conversation, Kenny. It aligns with my show mission to bring farmers the people and ideas that'll impact their farming operation. And I know you touched on it, sustainability, whether it's environmental and financial. This is so important for farmers, right?
It is, and it's only going to be more important. I don't have to tell a farmer how tight margins are right now, how unreliable borders or political situations can be. That's not our area of specialty, but our area of specialty, if you think of KWS, think of a plant breeder who's focused on that. We don't do chemical. We have a pretty clear culture and vision, and we want to bring new crops here to Canada, new varieties that bring you advantages, and yield as well as agronomics are at the heart of those. So that's what you can expect now that hopefully you'll remember the name KWS.
I love it. Thank you, Kenny, so much for joining me on the show. I really appreciate the information you shared, and I've enjoyed this conversation. So thank you. Thank you.
So have I, Tracy. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate you finding a place for us here on your show.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you. And you guys in the audience, if you found this fascinating and you want to learn more, go to our show notes, go to the KWS website and dig in, connect with the team and learn more. Like this episode, share it, get it out there so other farmers can learn more as well. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.